Well, I purchased several inexpensive equipment stands at a local automotive, hardware, tools, and houseware supply store. And as you can see, they're made of light-duty, light-gauge steel. And what this means is that there's a certain amount of flex. Yeah. When you apply some sideways force on the table, you can see the flex there. And the table itself, okay, you can see it's got a bit of lateral movement as well. I needed the stand to be a little bit stiffer. I don't like the table moving around when I'm working with it. So I decided to mount it to a light wooden frame that should provide enough stiffness to satisfy my needs. So an equipment stand works better if you have some way of leveling the table, or at least, well, when it's sitting on an uneven floor, or at least stop it from wobbling from side to side. You know, if you on an uneven floor, you might find the table wobbling. There's not too much wobble right now, but on an uneven floor, you just might have that. Now, for the feet, I didn't find exactly what I wanted during a quick web search. What I want is a fairly substantial foot with rubber non-slip soles on it. So what I found was, let's just take a look over here. What I found were these rubber soles available at a local home improvement big box store. Okay, they come in two colors, brown, white. And I needed a rigid foot with an attached post that could connect the feet to the stand or to the wooden frame that I'm going to build. So here's what I made. Start with is a light wooden stand made from reclaimed lumber, stud lumber. And it's glued at each corner with number 20 biscuits, and it matches the footprint of the equipment stand. Now, these soles are rubber, and they're normally used to prevent office equipment casters from rolling around on the floor. What I did was I cut a square hole in the bottom of each to allow room for the bottom nut on the rigid foot. And the posts for each foot are cut from this length of 3/8 16 threaded rod galvanized steel. There's the result there. Now the rigid feet I cut from a piece of 4x4 angle iron I had just laying around. That's in pretty bad shape, really pitted. So I cut the 2-inch square pieces out from this and cleaned it up as best I could with an angle grinder. I drilled a 3/8 hole in the center of each rigid foot to take the threaded rod. For the bottom nut, I ground down a regular nut to about a quarter inch, maybe a little bit more than a quarter inch thick, so that when it sits in the little well I cut, doesn't interfere with the floor. The nut doesn't rub on the floor. So there's the rigid foot and post assembly. It just fits into the rubber sole like so. I did attempt to thread the rigid foot take the post, but using hand alignment, I always got the threading on a little bit of an angle with respect to the plane of the rigid foot. So if I'd started the top with using the drill press, for example, rotating the quill by hand, I would have got a straight through top. I'll try that next. Now I use T-nuts, countersunk into the bottom of the frame to accept the threaded post. The countersinking is so that the nut on top of the post can fit into that recess and give us a lower profile. Here's what I mean. You can actually get the foot almost up the bottom of the rigid foot, or the top of the rigid foot almost up to the bottom of the wooden frame. Then the frame's placed under the stand and secured with the top hardware. Just placing the stand on a random place on the floor in my shop. You can see we've got a little bit of wobble. So just to show you how it's adjusted, loosen off the top hardware. Bring the foot down a little bit. Tighten up the foot. There, eliminated the wobble. The only remaining thing to do is to glue the rubber soles onto the rigid feet, probably using polyurethane glue, and use Loctite on the rigid foot hardware there so that it never comes loose. That's about it. So the result, very little leg flexing, very little wobble. That's it. And while we do have a little bit of movement in the tabletop, it's much better than it was before.